Hello bunnies, welcome back all to Woodland Bunny. This is a very delayed July wrap up. I was debating not doing it because I didn't read that much and it wasn't the best reading month either, but I had some really good books in here that I did read that I did want to talk about. So in terms of what I read and the overall quantity and quality, it wasn't the best, but the ones in which I did have good quality, shall we say, I really want to discuss. So let's get into all of the books I read in the month of July. So starting with stats, I read 8 books in total, and that is equivalent to 3,265 pages. Splitting that up between audiobooks and physical, it was actually 50-50, so I read 4 either side. And then in terms of rating and what I rated my books, I had 1 2 stars, 2 3 stars, 1 3.5 stars, 3 4 stars, and then 1 5 stars. So let's get into the actual books that I read. First off is Broken Bonds, in which was my first 2-star read. I listened to this via audio, so I don't have the physical edition with me, and I don't think I'm going to be purchasing it. I genuinely can't really remember much about this book. This is how much I disliked it. I think I just didn't enjoy the reverse harem aspect, and this was my first read of that subgenre, and I just couldn't get to grips with it. I found the main character to be whiny, the love interests were just fighting against each other all the time, there was just no plot progression. It just felt like this really big male angst, and then our main character was just kind of caught in the middle of the situation and whining about it continuously. We had characters popping out from nowhere, and yeah, I just found it overall really frustrating, really annoying, and I didn't like it whatsoever. I think this is a series, but I won't be continuing on with it. So then let's move on to my 3-star reads, starting off with Cackle by Rachel Harrison. Now this one was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I feel like 3-star has such a negative connotation, whereas 3-star for me means I did really enjoy it. It just was missing that little spark, and I did really enjoy this. I enjoyed the female empowerment aspect, the friendship aspect in there. I really thought this book was going to take a sapphic direction, but it didn't. It ended up being about female empowerment and female friendships, and which was really good to see. And it almost this small town and these spooky, horror-filled things that were going on, and it was just overall a fun time. But again, I feel like the biggest gripe for me was I did find our character to be quite whiny and quite annoying, and she was just pining over her boyfriend constantly, and obviously I completely understand she was going through a breakup, but yeah, it got to a point where it's just really frustrating, and it felt like we needed to get all the way to the end of the book for this to stop happening, in which again was annoying. I think if I could change anything about this book, it would be that we kind of resolved that situation with the boyfriend quite quickly. I feel like as readers we knew what was going to happen, but it's always like the main character didn't see it coming, in which from a reality perspective I suppose that is always the case, but in terms to read about, I just found it frustrating. But all the other aspects I did find really intriguing. So if you like themes of small town, horror, female empowerment and female friendship, then this is definitely one I encourage you to pick up. My next 3-star read was Crave, and this has themes of a kind of brooding male romance, a typical YA vampire read set in a school, and yeah, it just felt like your typical YA book, but it was just such a delight to read and almost felt like a guilty pleasure, I suppose. I don't like referring to books like that, but if you had to categorize it, I suppose that's how you would. But yeah, if those themes do sound interesting to you and the classic Twilight but with a little bit of a twist sounds interesting, then I definitely recommend this one. I listened to it via audio and I had a really fun time doing so. And we have my 3.5-star read, in which was I Kissed Shara Wheeler, and this had a really interesting concept, but I think that execution wasn't quite there for me, in which was quite upsetting. I really enjoyed the character progression and the relationships founded between the characters, but the other main character, I found her frustrating and annoying, and I feel like this is becoming a theme in all of my books and why I've rated them so low. Maybe this is more of a me problem, but in terms of Shara Wheeler herself, I just found her very entitled, very frustrating and annoying, and again it was the kind of thing in which it took the whole book for this situation to be resolved between our main characters, in which I feel like it could have been done quite quickly, but then we would have been left without a book or plot progression. But I think because it was just a typical YA, that's why I did rate it 3.5 stars. So I wasn't anticipating or expecting high amounts of huge plot progression or huge character development, etc, etc. So I really enjoyed it for what it was, but I think there's points I would improve. So if themes of a high school sort of drama and a mystery ongoing and found friendships with unlikely friendships, I suppose, and almost figuring out your life sound interesting to you, then I definitely recommend this one. Next up, we have my 4-star reads. So we're going to start off with Wild Things, in which featured in a vlog, so you probably know all about my thoughts if you have watched that vlog. But to recap quite quickly, this has themes of friendships and not really knowing what's going on with your life and understanding your sexuality and what direction you want to go in your life and being stuck in a rut, and it's almost just the mundanity of life captured in a book, but in such a fun way. Like, I feel like that sounds incredibly boring, but it was just so fun. It was so honest, so raw, and I just enjoyed it so very much. It was exactly what I needed when reading it. It's just absolutely amazing to sit and fly through it and sort of agree with our main character and all of the problems that she was facing and understand where she's coming from different points of view. And it was just really great to see a really mundane, nitty-gritty book in which was a lot of fun, but it was quite light-hearted in the contemporary aspects as well. So if this sounds interesting to you, then I recommend Wild Things. Then I finally read a very anticipated release for me, in which is *𝚘𝚊𝚍, and I really loved this one. I kept thinking about it non-stop after I stopped listening to the audio. So I listened to this via audio and then bought it physically straight away because I just became obsessed with it and was just non-stop thinking about it. The only thing I wanted more from this book is I sort of saw it advertised as a publishing and like a discussion around book publishing, but I feel like it did stray more towards social media than publishing. It did have elements of that in there, but it was much more focused around like the social media aspect of it. So I felt like a bit more publishing would have been really, really enjoyable and made this a 5-star for me. So this has themes of racism and who has the right to tell a story and narcissism, and yeah, it just made me feel so many emotions and took me on a whole roller coaster. And I highly doubt that you wouldn't have heard of this book, but if you haven't and these themes sound interesting to you, then I recommend *𝚘𝚊𝚍. So the next 4-star read that I read was *River of Shadows, in which I listened to via audiobook, and I am still yet to buy the physical edition. This had themes of rivals to lovers and death being a person. It was steamy and had themes of gods and alternative worlds and parental relationships, and it was just a genuinely fun time. I am 100% going to continue on with this series because I just had so much fun with it. I feel like it was very much rivals to lovers done correctly, in terms of it wasn't much like, oh, I hate you a little bit, I hate you a little bit. It was very much like they hate each other, they can't deny their attraction to one another, and it was just such a joy to listen to, and I cannot wait to get to the next book. So I highly recommend that one if you like these themes. My feature book of the month, and actually my 5-star book of the month, is A Kind of Spark. Now this one, it just holds my heart and I haven't stopped thinking about it since I did put it down. It has themes of autism representation, in which made me feel so seen. I understood the characters' narrative and the way in which their thoughts were voiced, and it was the first time in which I read a book and I didn't have to kind of overthink or even compensate to understand the characters' thought process or how they got to that conclusion. It was such an easy read for me and it just flowed and I felt so seen, so represented. It does have themes of bullying and being misunderstood, but it just felt so wholesome, so raw, but it is, I think it's a younger read, so this is suitable for younger audiences. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it so very much. I felt so many emotions the whole way through it and I genuinely would not change a thing. I believe there is like a adaptation coming out, a television adaptation, which I'm unsure if I'm going to watch it because I just love the book so much and it lives on in my head. And when I have this certain kind of movie playing in my head that I've made up, I quite like that version, and sometimes watching the TV version almost ruins it for me. So I'm unsure if I'm going to do that yet, but yes, I genuinely highly recommend this book to you. It's such a quick quick read, it's so short, and it was genuinely life-changing for me, so I absolutely adored this one. So those were all of the books I read in the month of July. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you have a wonderful day or night, and until next time, friends, bye.